Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. They range from Alda to Zudek, from photographic realist to abstract expressionist. They're young, they're old, they're black, white, Asian, and Hispanic, men and women, gay and straight. They are the renowned and they are the less celebrated, but no less worthy of attention. They are contemporary New York painters, and they've been lovingly collected and beautifully presented by Cynthia Dantzic in her new book, 100 New York Painters. Cynthia is professor of art at LIU's Brooklyn campus. She is the author of several books on drawing and design, including The Pocket Mirror in America. Her calligraphy, drawings, paintings, photographs, and photo collages have been collected, published, and exhibited widely. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book and condolences. For the viewers, Cynthia's husband, Jerry Dantzic, died on December 14, 2006. He was a renowned photojournalist, and I was privileged to have met Jerry and to do 2 City Talk shows on his work with his son and archivist, Grayson Dantzic, and his book, New York 50s in Focus, remains one of my absolutely favorite pieces of work that I just look at constantly. So I thank you, and again, my condolences. Okay. 100 New York painters. How does this book come about?
Well, I didn't want to do it. Actually, my publisher, Schiffer, had done a book with me on the
Untitled Mirrors, which we'll talk about later.
And so he knew I could do the job and keep a deadline and all of that.
Right.
And then he approached me and asked me about doing this book, and I said, oh no, because I know many, many painters in New York, and some people who think that they're worthy, and some, and then there are famous ones that I've never met.
Right.
And I thought, this is too much. How can you select 100 from the many thousands, actually, of people in New York who are painters?
Will you do another book, another 100 New York
Well,
artists?
I'm going to. That's for later.
So go ahead.
At any rate, I said I didn't think so. And then a little while later, I was at the Armory on 67th and Park Avenue at an art fair, and one of my classmates and favorite people, Richard Anaskevich, was there. He's a painter. He's in the book.
Yes.
And he was there, and then Bernard Chait, another.
And he's also in the book. A lot of your friends are in the book, and neighbors, too. Go ahead.
Well, true, but they're friends because
of the art.
Of their art.
Okay.
Not all, at any rate. 3 of them live on my block in Brooklyn.
And you've got families, you've got fathers and wives and daughters. Go ahead, talk more about how you did it.
I'm at the fair, I'm at the art fair, and there's Peter Schiffer, and the Schiffer of Schiffer Publishing, and his wife Nancy.
Who does all of these high quality art.
And we said hello,
books.
and then I said, oh, I'd like you to meet Anaskevich, Chait, and then there was Louis Newman, who's the director of the Findlay Junior Gallery. And I guess he thought I knew everybody, because about a week later, I'm having dinner in my home in Brooklyn. Phone rings, and he says, this is Peter Schiffer. And I thought, who? Peter Schiffer. He said, obviously, we're going to do this book. Obviously, you're the one to do it, and I'm sending you a contract.
Okay.
Well, that's hard.
Okay, so now you've got this contract. You have to pick out 100 New York painters. What were the criteria that you used for selection? I mean, given the multiplicity of styles and media and age and subject matter, how did you pick these pieces of art?
It was difficult, but the main criterion was variety. I really wanted to show the diversity of art and artists, and to show the widest possible range that I could find.
Okay, describe this range. What do you mean, the range?
Well, very famous, never heard of. Living in New York now, used to live in New York, had a studio or still has a studio in New York.
So there's a real New York connection.
Oh, there has to be some New York connection.
Right.
But but it was difficult. For example, can I just tell you one of my favorite painters and people on the planet is Richard Mayhew. I've known him for 40 years, since he was with the Spiral Group, and a wonderful person. I said, Richard, I love your painting. You're a wonderful person. You live in California.
Okay,
so he said, don't my first 62 years in New York count?
And you said yes.
Of course.
And then you've got him in the book.
Of course.
Okay.
62 years.
So variety of styles, variety of media, what else? Then New York.
They have to have some New York connection,
right.
Some affiliation with New York. And then, as I say, the breadth, the range, from some super photographic realism, more precise than a camera could ever capture, to absolutely geometric concepts, intellectual paintings, to everything I could find, the greatest range, and not necessarily work that I personally like. I didn't pick 100 of my favorite painters, and they're not the 100 best painters. There's an overview.
Okay, so it is meant to be sort of a taste, a smorgasbord of these various artists and their work.
Exactly.
And what you do with each of the 100 artists, you provide a brief biographical and artistic and intellectual and philosophical sketch, as well as, you know, what they were associated with, as well as 3 or 4 really beautiful color reproductions. And one of the things that struck me was the quality of the photographs themselves. And when you compare it with, as we have looked at other publications of these artists, the color and the texture in this is really striking. The publisher really did a good job.
Yeah, I think that I could have done the best possible job, but if it hadn't been printed as beautifully, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was visiting one of the artists just this weekend, Emily Mason, who has a brand new, beautiful monograph of her work out, and we compared one of the big paintings, my favorite, Juice it's called, in her book and in my book, and we both had to agree that Schiffer did a better job.
There really is a difference. I mean, I don't know art. I'm a social scientist. I'm, a math guy, chemistry guy, one of those kind of guys.
Geometry is
art. No, I understand that. And in fact, the geometric work was very interesting, and the color shading was very interesting. But how do you get down to 100? How did you get to the 100?
I did 2 things. I prepared 2 letters. One was for famous Pearlstein, Katz.
Who you didn't know?
I hadn't met them, but I knew their work.
Right.
Of course,
Chuck Close?
Well, I had met him, but he doesn't know it. I meet him frequently.
Okay, so they're the renown that you don't know.
The one letter was, it would be an honor to include you in this book that I'm preparing.
Right.
Would you please,
Right.
And no one turned me down except one person, I won't tell you who. He didn't turn me down, he just didn't answer. And the other was a letter to people I hadn't heard of, or that I didn't really know, or that people recommended but I hadn't met them. Quite a few people said, oh, you must include so-and-so.
So there's a lot of serendipity in this.
Absolutely. The other letter said, for consideration in a book I am preparing, I would appreciate response to this request for information and slides or pictures of your work. So I had 2 letters going out. And then slowly, I put them into categories and tried to find 100 points of light or 100 points of art. Too many photorealists, not necessary. Too many abstract expressions, just not enough. I wanted the variety.
Right.
Also, some people who have exhibited for many, many years and very, very famous, like Tooker.
Right.
I didn't know he was still alive.
And the Subway is one of the great works, and he exhibited that in the 50s. The first artist, Alder, painted for this work.
I didn't know her either. She's a wonderful person. She swam around New York, the island, for some charitable cause. She's very athletic.
These people do a lot of things
She
other
goes
than
down
to
to
paint.
Mexico and to Australia to photograph, and she's a beautiful illustrator, but she's a wonderful person. And we talked, and she said, New York. She said, well, I'm working on a painting about Coney Island. And I said, well, if you finish the painting on Coney Island, I could consider it. She knocked herself out. Beautiful.
Yeah, first
That's
painting
Coney
in the
Island
book.
is New
It's
York.
excellent. Yes.
We have quite a few Coney Island references in the book.
Now, among the art that you picked, are there, in your own personal taste, what do you gravitate toward? What type of art do you gravitate toward, and how is it represented in the book?
Actually, I really like very many different kinds of art, some that I couldn't do the photorealism if I wanted to, that's just beyond my technical precision. I do respond to, I studied with Joseph Albers, so I do respond to a lot of color work
and geometric
and things that have kind of precision.
A lot of Albers students and proteges in here.
Well, I was very lucky. I was there at a time, almost all of my classmates have had a monograph by Abrams. William Bailey and Welliver and just great, famous, and they're wonderful. But they don't all necessarily do geometric work like William Bailey does work. He's not in the book because he's not in New York. But the idea that you don't have to copy his style to understand his color theories and to use them in your painting. Dick Lew is a terrific example of that. He has faceted palette knife paintings of apples and fruits.
Yes.
But you can see the Albers color. I can explain later, I'll show you, the little areas of color which are affected by what's adjacent to them, because the color doesn't exist by itself, it's adjacent to another color and there's an interaction between them. But that doesn't have to be only in geometric paintings, that can happen in any painting.
So one of the things that struck me again as a non-artist is the tremendous variety of interpretations of similar, what could be similar objects or thoughts or feelings that are pulled out of here.
Well, I was thinking that also this could be used, it's not a textbook, although I've done a few textbooks, this could be used as a kind of textbook. For example, waterfalls. There are at least half a dozen ways to think about a waterfall.
And they're here in a variety of ways, and mainly in an abstract way rather than really in a representational way.
Some.
Who of the photorealist is your favorite? If you had to have a photorealist in your living room that you had to look at,
well, I've never met her, and I haven't seen the actual paintings. But Lee Benke intrigues me. She has a wonderful quality. There's a certain softness and light infusion that I like that I don't see in some of the photorealists who are a little too mechanical and cool. But if I were to pick a painting that I want, I was thinking, you had asked me earlier, and I just was going through the book in my mind, and there are a few paintings that I would like to have, and I don't think they're the best paintings in the world, but I like them, and I love them.
Well, isn't that the criterion?
No.
You like them?
No.
No, what's the criterion?
There are many, many criteria.
Go ahead.
But for a painting, it has to work. What that art students know and artists know what you mean by work. It has to come together in some kind of a cohesive way and speak to you in a way that shows you something about color or light or relationship of elements in a geometric way, or perhaps in a just, for example, Emily Mason's work has no geometry really. There's an underpinning of sense that there might be a geometric, but it's the play of color and the clash and the flow and the excitement of color, like visual music.
Okay.
I mean, nobody would ever ask you, if you listen to a string quartet, it's nice music, it sounds a beautiful arrangement of sounds and tones and timing and interval, but what's it about? No one would ask you, what's a string quartet about? But for some reason, people seem to feel the need for a subject often in painting, and if you look at painting as visual music in that way, you don't have to.
But you need a trained eye to do that to a certain extent.
Sometimes.
While the more representational art or even impressionistic art, it's there. It's recognizable.
But
so therefore familiar.
Not necessarily. If you keep an open mind and look, you can see. But some people look to see something they expect to see, or something they've seen before, or something they think they ought to respond to. And that's another reason that I'm very satisfied with the way this worked out. It's simply placed alphabetically, so but it just happens that there are no clusters of one particular style or type of painting. You'll go from completely abstract splashes of color to precise geometry.
And I think the alphabetical works that way because it prevents sort of a systematic look, that you've got this variety.
Serendipity, because you can't plan that.
Right.
And the population groups, I really wanted to show, again, that New York is such an interfacing of so many different kinds of people, every group that you can think of.
And then they're admixed within single individuals. You've got, Russian, Jew, Cherokee, Indian, Sicilians in here.
You name it. I think as far as I can tell, it gives people who are outside of New York the chance to see New York is a cultural paradise. It's just an enrichment of variety.
So it's here.
I think it's
York,
here.
Is New York the capital of contemporary art?
Well, it's not for me to say that, but it has been said, and I think that my effort to put this book together reinforces that thought.
Could you put together a book called 100 Chicago painters or 100 San Francisco painters? Or do we have to do 50 or 75?
No,
I don't want to insult people.
I'm sure you could. But in fact, because so many people wanted to know why this person and that person might have been left out.
Right.
Oh, I've been getting letters from people. What do I have to do to, how to... So I am beginning to collect, slowly, another 100 for Volume 2.
Talk about some of the serendipity of talking to an artist, looking at the work, and then being turned on to... What was the most sort of interesting find or exciting find that you came into this artist studio and said, wow, I didn't know this piece, and it did something?
Well, we were talking about Richard Mayhew before.
Yes.
And he said, how can you do this book without Ed Clark? And I had to admit that I really wasn't that familiar with Ed Clark.
Who does the push broom painting?
Push broom painting.
I mean, I don't know. I might be a little Philistine about this, but go ahead.
Well, he's pretty innovative. He's an older generation, and he had been in the army in Europe. And in Europe, he had shows of paintings that were very, very creative and very original. He took the rectangular canvas and put a little shape off.
Right.
So, shaped canvas. This was his
Then
stuff.
this was
brand new in the 40s.
Revolutionary.
In Paris.
Why didn't somebody think of this in the 5,000 years before?
Well, they have in a different way. The shaped canvas has been around in a different way, but not the irregularly shaped canvas. At any rate, he comes back to New York, and he's just another black guy that no one paid much attention to. So there was a bit of a... He went to Europe, he went all around the world, and finally he came back to New York, and his studio is it's south of the Empire State Building, about 10 blocks south, on about the 20th floor. So you look out of his studio window and you see the belly.
Has he painted it?
He doesn't paint representationally,
but
But what I'm saying is, his studio is the quintessential New York studio. You look right out the window. And as the night, he showed me thousands and thousands of slides and boxes of things from 1940s up till last week, and I'm looking at every single one to try to select the one.
Right.
But meanwhile, I'm looking out the window because the Empire State Building is doing its color job, and it disappeared into the blackness.
Sure.
Oh, so that's the quintessential New York art studio. And he's a wonderful person and a great, important artist, very groundbreaking, but I didn't know him.
What about the families? You've got the Kahns, you've got the Dinnersteins. Is there, intergenerational?
There seems to be. I very much like the work of Wolf Kahn. He was an German immigrant many, many years ago, World War II. And then he had met Emily Mason, another young painter, and they had married and worked together, and both of them developing in very different ways.
Yeah, and we'll see that. I mean, they're very, very different.
So I called Wolf, asked him if I could visit his studio and select some work, and he was very nice, and he's very organized. I went to his studio, selected some work, and he said, well, are you including Cecily? And I have to admit, I wasn't sure. Our daughter. Well, there was an exhibit at Hunter College of three generations of women abstract painters. Emily, her mother, who's no longer alive, Alice Trumbull Mason, and the daughter Cecily Kahn.
So you had multiple generations of artists as well.
So what I did for the book, and I looked at Cecily's work, and of course it's wonderful. She's a fourth generation abstract painter because her grandmother was also a painter, complicated. So that's Kahn Mason. And then on my very block in Brooklyn lives Harvey Dinnerstein, a wonderful, wonderful realist painter, very socially conscious. Dinnerstein has a brother, Simon Dinnerstein, completely different, in the neighborhood also in Brooklyn. But Harvey has a daughter, Rachel, whom I knew her since she babysat for my son many, many years ago. At any rate, her paintings are wonderful. And so we have Dinnerstein.
So you have
Kahn, Mason.
You have people that you don't know. You have people that live on your block.
Three.
And there were faculty members at both LIU and in other academic institutions that are part of that group. Let's talk about the already famous in your interactions with them. You've got Chuck Close, you've got Alex Katz, you've got Philip Pearlstein, you've got Janet Fish, you've got George Tucker, Helen Frankenthaler. Were the famous different than the non-famous in terms of sort of their personas, their attitudes, or they're so diverse that you can't generalize?
I don't distinguish. I'm very democratic. I don't make distinctions like that. I just don't.
Like what?
Famous, not famous.
But the world has made those distinctions.
The world makes many distinctions I don't accept.
Right. But in terms of dealing with them, were they any different? Were they more forthcoming with their... Was there a difference between those, in a sense, who had made it, if you will, and those who had not yet made it?
Well, there was a difference in terms of getting the work. For example, with Chuck Close, I got a beautiful letter from his gallery saying that he would love to participate. He's just too busy, but that if I contacted his studio sent me the letter, that if I contacted his gallery, perhaps they might help. So the gallery was fine, no problem at all. And his work is so particularly wonderful to me.
I love it. And you gave me this flip book that shows moving from the very abstract to the concrete picture. I saw him exhibited in Washington, D.C. And you stand away, and there's these giant pictures that are... They're portraits, but as you move closer, you lose the definition, and you're involved in these little modules and cells.
The Pointillists and the Impressionists did something like that too.
Yeah, Seurat.
But in a different way.
Right.
But the idea that up close the painting loses its specific as you move back.
Right.
So if you look, the lovely little flip book shows the up close individual units, the modules, and then as it optically mixes at a distance.
Yeah, it was really fascinating having seen that.
Of course, it's amazing that he can paint at all, unfortunately.
Go ahead, talk about that.
Well, not to go into it too much, but he has physical disabilities which make it necessary for him to use hydraulic equipment to move his canvases, and I don't know how he can work at all, but he's magnificent. He pays no attention to that. He goes ahead. He's at every opening. He lives. He paints. He does the work. And it's
truly
beautiful.
Incredible. When you do another 100 New York painters, what would be your approach? Would it be similar? I mean, what does this next book look like?
I don't know. I have about 5 or 6 next books that I'm thinking about right now.
Well, talk about this one. I mean, you have a list of the folks already in your head, and you have the type of art. So, okay, so it's really, it's formative in your mind.
There are a few, though. I'll have to tell you one particular one, if you don't mind.
No.
Because when I finally selected the 100, I counted men and women, because people are going to ask you, and by some accident, it was 50 men and 50 women. Then I looked at my list, and Helen Frankenthaler, I forgot to reach her, and I wouldn't do it without her for another reason that I'll tell you in a minute. So I had to add Helen Frankenthaler, and the person that I removed was a person whose paintings are a little bit like pattern paintings, a little bit like some other people in the book. So it made.
So you have 51 women.
Yeah, a lot of my women friends think that's wonderful, and I did it purposely. I don't distinguish. I don't discriminate. I have some of my best friends are women. That's all right.
But you've got tremendous diversity, as I indicated in my introduction, along a broad range of things. Let's go to, very briefly, let's go to an earlier book, this Antique Pocket Mirrors, Pictorial and Advertising Miniatures. And this was the first book that you did with Schiffer, and in fact led Schiffer to come to you. How did you do this?
This was an accident.
Briefly, tell me how do you collect these mirrors and then make them collections of art, because they are art.
They are. They're miniature graphic design. It started very simply in an antique shop in Maine one day when Jerry and we used to look at antique shops for various reasons.
Well, you traveled all over the country, the two of you.
And the world, right. Well, he got Guggenheim grants to travel across the United States and pick the most beautiful panoramic shots.
I know. We've seen them. But go ahead. Let's talk about this.
In an antique shop, they will come out, "Can I help you, madam?" And if I said, "Yes, I'm looking for a lovely Amish quilt," they might have one. And I don't have the money. So I looked around, and there was this little oval on the table, a little oval of a hotel in Florida, kind of. So I said, "Interesting graphic." She said, "Oh, 10 cents, and it's yours." So we started picking them up every place. I didn't even look at them really at first, because it was, you walk in, you buy something.
Right.
50 cents. After a while, they got to be $3.
Hey, come on.
And one time,
that's pushing it.
Jerry came home with 3 one time. He had spent $10 on 3. Oh, I said,
come on,
he's
being excessive.
Those are among the 3 most valuable ones we have now. A Coca-Cola that's worth, I don't know, multi-hundreds of dollars.
What were these pocket mirrors? I mean, I found this interesting, perversely, I guess. Why Why these pocket mirrors? What were their purposes? Obviously, Campbell's soup, Victrola.
Before Andy Warhol saw that Campbell's soup was an art subject, Campbell's soup had a little mirror.
That's right.
They were given out as trade souvenirs from promotional items. Also, people had them at weddings, brides and grooms, and that's a wonderful history of fashion design and historic places. It's just a whole overview of...
you find art
in everything.
In everything. In strange places. Yeah. I mean, in Maine, in pocket mirrors.
Well, the way I got the book, though, I had gone to another antique show at the Piers in New York, and Schiffer had a small bookshop. And they have advertising, collectibles, military, whatever you want, they have books. So I went in, and innocently I said, I'd like to see your book on the pocket mirrors. And the minute she said, the what? I knew I had another book.
Okay.
I did.
Is this how you're going to find out your next book, when you really decide which one of the many books you want to do?
No, I have about 6 more in the works in my mind.
Well, we'll have to see them, and we have no time, so you're going to have to come back with the next book.
Or previous books.
Or previous books.
I have my lovely alphabet book.
The
silent alphabet.
This is true. We're not going to do it. We only did 2 books today. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.